I guess I wanted to just start. I mean, Nick, if I had to put a headline on that, it would have been convergence of services, divergence of devices. From anybody's, I mean, why don't we got two broadband network guys here. How disruptive is that to what you guys have traditionally, as communications companies? How disruptive is it to have television now descending on things that had been communications networks? Sure.
I think it's not going to be disruptive. It's a logical consequence of what we have been trying to establish, which is a great entertainment experience in the household across all devices.
Okay.
So if you buy triple play, great broadband access, great television channels, great user experience, and that starts to really sort of trickle out across all devices in the household. And it's a great gaming experience in addition for your kids and for the family. It's linear TV or whatever. So I really buy into the vision that Nika just laid out, and that's it. So it's really a logical path. And at the end of the day, some of the devices will disappear like set-top boxes, right? New devices are going to come out, but we think that's really a logical consequence. I think the challenge for us is really to embrace the technology and the competence that a telco needs to build up to really become very savvy in that, which is cloud, which is platforms, which is partnering, et cetera.
I was going to say, let me throw that to Jean-Paul. I mean, exactly, when those devices disappear, the place they disappear into is that cloud. And one of the things that does is it would seem to put you as Orange, as a telco, in competition with the traditional television infrastructure. I mean, do you find yourself, once upon a time, those were industries that stayed well away from each other. How do you feel about suddenly being in competition with satellite television and cable operators? And
generally speaking, where we are not in competition with satellite, because when you have a broadband network, for sure, it's the right way to provide TV and contents at home. What is completely new is for sure the mobile, and you discussed that 2 years ago, and the way we may keep to the promise, which is my contents everywhere. It could be at home, or it could be on the move. It could be on a TV, it could be on a tablet. But for music, it's easy to explain that. For movies, for example, it's much complex because the device itself is part of the proposition for the customer. So you can't say that I have my contents, my movie everywhere, whatever the device. You have to fit to the device. The device is part of the proposition for the customers. So we have to invent something which is probably new, how I may replicate my contents on different devices, and probably how I may complement the contents on different devices. For example, I am looking to a movie, and I have something on my tablet which is related to the movie on the TV, or something on my mobile. So probably it's completely new on the way we approach these contents.
Let me ask Giles a question. You guys provide a complete across-the-board service, everything from HD television to mobile.
Sure.
And you do it for a lot of different operators in all kinds of different contexts all around the world. What are you seeing in how usage patterns are changing as somebody who's got a relatively neutral view? Are we already seeing it, and where are we seeing it the most, and what are the trends that you see in usage?
I think we are seeing it, and I think we're seeing it right across the spectrum. Previous speaker discussed the question of what is TV, and traditionally TV was a device, and then it became much more about a network. It was cable or it was satellite, and I think we've already moved to the next stage, and a lot of that has been kicked through from the internet. People do want to watch content, on their own terms. They want to watch it on multiple devices, and what we've seen change really is devices are no longer tied to networks. My smartphone agilely moves between my mobile network and my wireless, which is effectively fixed line. So, TV in the future, it's actually about the service. It's about compelling content wrapped up in a compelling user experience, delivered across any network. It can be over the top or a managed network to all of my screens and in different ways. Because
well, you mentioned user experience. I mean, in geek terms, UI, user interface.
Yeah.
I mean, television has had a pretty simple UI for a really long time. As actually one of its benefits was that anybody could go up to practically any TV.
Sure.
How do you see that? I mean, is it a technical challenge? Is it a sociological challenge? Where's that going to play out?
There are some challenges, but I think they're all relatively well solved. This really comes down again to what was previously said about the devices being different. We don't believe that you converge all the services into all the devices. We believe you give a converged experience across multiple devices and you reach them across multiple networks. So, for instance, one of the things that we fundamentally believe is that the user experience and user interactivity should be taken away from the TV screen completely. TVs are good.
This
for
is the
showing
second screen
pictures.
idea?
It's the second screen. It's about bringing the user experience away from the TV screen and putting it on a secondary device, a companion device, normally either a smartphone or a tablet, which is much better for interacting with, and actually also solves a number of the other classic problems. When we came into IPTV, one of the big perceived advantages was that it could be much more personalized.
Does that mean interactive or?
Yeah, personalized content, more interactive, more targeted advertising. The problem with that is that we find that in large households, people didn't want to log on to their TV. So you never knew who the guy in front of the TV was. The classic thing about a mobile phone is it's a very personal device and it uniquely identifies you in a secure way, so you can really target people who are using the interactivity on the secondary device in a way you can't do
But when
on the
you've
main
got a
screen.
Connect enable, I'll do a Microsoft commercial now, when you've got a Connect available, that television can look and see who's watching. Is it the kids? Is it I mean, it doesn't take long before that phone's advantage goes away.
But it's still got the better user experience, and always there are easy and more difficult ways to solve problems.
Let me shift gears to something that Nikesh, the question came up, somebody, and this is for Ted, I mean, you run National Geographic Television is a very, very big global network. It's everywhere you go, millions of countries, all across lots of different things. What is the role of a network? I mean, is there going to be, what's the point of having National Geographic Channel on 50 million or how many, 300 million?
300, yeah, 350. Yeah. I think, I like what Nikesh said, that you're taking content producers with content consumers, and that's what we're trying to do, is reach those consumers with what we think is very high quality content. And what he also said, it's unclear what the model is going to be to do that going forward. And I think, where we come, so we're both a content producer, we have a production company, but we also own the National Geographic Channel. And what we want to do is continue to be able to do the flagship documentary work that we do, and that means you're spending between $500,000 and $1 million per hour of television. So what the models that exist today enable us to make that investment. And we obviously, the technology exists for consumers to consume that content in all kinds of different ways, but we are just trying to maintain some kind of rational business terms so we can continue to make that investment, because we think consumers do want that investment and we think it matters.
So you function as a studio, in other words. But now what about what about the distribution part of the business? Why?
Well, I think the network is going to become rationalizing the different platforms and the different windows, because what the network pays us, even though we own the network, we pay ourselves that $500 to $1 million for that hour of television. So the network then has that IP, and it can figure out how do you want to window.
Now we're talking a different kind of IP from
sorry,
where there's two kinds of IP.
Intellectual property. So, but the network can determine, do you want to make it available on big screens? Do you want to make it available on mobile? Do you want to make it available on iPads? And the statistic I always quote is, in the U.S., the cable networks, the platforms including Comcast and DirecTV and Verizon spend $35 billion a year on content. And so they are really bolstering this whole investment in content. And so I think they're going to play an important part in determining sort of how are you windowing, when do you make stuff available. And when you take what Sky and Canal Plus and all these other networks are paying. It's a huge amount of aggregated pay for all this great content, but I think they're going to determine a lot sort of how we.
Well, here, I mean, most people here are, even though this is an American example, probably familiar. In the last Time Warner spun out its cable company into a separate, because they decided they wanted a content company over here and a distribution company over here. At almost the exact same time, Comcast, another big company, decides it's going to go out and buy a broadcast network, NBC. Who's right? I mean, I'll let everybody go down. I mean, are content and distribution going to continue to travel together, or are they going to go, do you expect, Deutsche, you guys, from all of your perspectives, how does that go? And then I want to finish off and let Mike go last, because I want Mike to talk a little bit about the ad-supported side of all this and what its future looks like. So why don't we just go from right here?
Our view is it's the aggregation of the content that is, that's most relevant for the consumer. There will be lots of models, right? And there is specific reasons why Comcast went the way they went. Very US specific, right? If you look at the European situation, extremely fragmented environment, almost country per country. Point of view, regulations, so both regulation on the networks, on content, on distribution, on about everything, right? Okay. So it's high level of fragmentation. And we're suffering through this because we're trying to operate in a dozen countries, right? Content is actually mostly local still. 70, 80%, that's what we see, right? And we're trying hard.
The other 20% is National Geographic.
So we're trying hard, to turn this into a sort of a media strategy that, is platform-based, open, and then, actually leverages content across countries. Extremely hard to do that. So, I mean, in particular in Europe, you'll see continuous fragmentation, and there is not one model. So you'll see all kinds of.
Well, wouldn't you make your life a lot easier by going the Time Warner route and just becoming a pipes company and providing IP connections to everybody and let the best man win?
Well, we see that the best customer satisfaction that we see is really, as I stated in the beginning, it's cross-device, it's one bundle, one subscription, including relevant content that we purchase on the market, be it user-generated or commercial or whatever. We package it and we play it out with a great user experience cross-connect.
Does that come with broadband? Is that packaged with broadband?
That's it. That's the usual, sort of the industry jargon, triple play, which is broadband, data, voice, and television. And we see great uptake there because I think people, and that it completely depends on the country, right? In Romania, our colleagues there just launched a content portal where, the real issue is piracy, right? Where the majority of content, in a country like Romania is just subject to piracy. So very low ARPUs, very low average revenue. They just sort of collected all this content, told people, well, at least it's legal on our portal, right? Mm-hmm. Very low revenue, right? But it has a great community effect. Completely different from Germany, from France, from other countries. Right? So, our view is we just collect that content wherever it sits, and play it out through our platform competence that we have, which is going to be cross-device.
Okay, Ted, how do you see it evolving?
It's the age-old question, is content king? And I think Comcast, it was a smart move because I think they're hedging whether content is king or distribution is king. Our partner, our cable channel, News Corp, has, even though they don't have a distribution network in the US, they have Sky and Sky Italia and other platforms around the world. And that's been very helpful to us to launch channels. So I think the right strategy is to be in both.
By helpful to launch channels, that means you can basically threaten people with.
Well, you can. Well, if you own the channel, if you own the satellite platform, you can threaten yourself, and you can say.
But I mean, ESPN, for instance, does pretty well, even though they don't own any pipes. They manage to.
Yeah, they do, but there's huge leverage battles there, and I think what Comcast made a bet, they want to be on both sides of that leverage battle.
So I mean, like for instance, the big fights that are happening now with Premier League. I mean, the top content really does seem to be on a up. May not be king, but it's getting damn rich.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think though you're at the same time you're having consumers. How much can they ultimately pay for their cable bill, and who?
What's the typical bill for a Deutsche Telekom for that package you talked about?
Again, it depends completely on the
In,
country.
say Germany. Germany.
I mean, typically what you see in Europe, typically it's the sort of the 50, 60 euro total bundle. That's
Which is cheaper than the U.S.
That's what we see, right?
All right. Okay, Giles.
I think there's three important parts. There's the content, which is actually the real value of the service. There's the consumer who supplies, he's the reward. And then there's the connectivity, the network in the middle that's required to connect the two together. So both the network and therefore the operator, and also the content are two key components that have to coexist. The operator's job is to aggregate content, as has been said, and provide that in a compelling user experience. The content guy's business is to invest in developing content and monetize that across as many channels in as smart a way as possible. You can own both as long as you can still play both games.
Okay, Jean-Paul.
Yes, I just want to complement a little bit. We invest in content 4 or 5 years ago, and clearly now our strategy is not to be involved in content providing, just to partner, which is very interesting. We are in a business which is very different from the one of the content, but we want to be the best one to partner with, and we are very focused on the business model as a whole. And Thomas said a word which is a key word, which is local. We have to do that very locally and to be very smart in the way we run the business in each country, because the competition, the regulation, the contents are very different from one country to another. To come back to your previous question, we invest in Dailymotion, which is a good number 2 compared to YouTube, as you know. And Dailymotion is, for us, a way to extend our business model by leveraging on what we know how to do. We have 220 million customers. We know how to speak to each of them, to segment and to invoice them. And it's the billing is an important part of the business model.
Mike, we're going to run out of time here. Let me switch this question. I mean, obviously, addressable television is one of the great. Right now, as I understand it, the TV world still dominates because it has these big audiences that marketers like. Big marketers like big audiences, and TV has them. How do you see that changing as all these changes? I mean, can social re-aggregate fragmented audiences? Can anything push the CPMs up to where it can support premium content without charging people? How do you see it playing out?
Yes.
Yes.
What was the question? So yeah, it's like revenge of the telco guys up here today, and I'm a former telco guy myself, and I know that we were spending a lot of time back in those days trying to acquire content, create the right walled garden experience, provide the, we always talk about the experience, but to the consumer, is it working? Is it fast enough? Is it downloading quick enough? Better than Netflix, better than Hulu, So as long as the service is good, it's a good place for telcos to play. The real exciting part right now is for the premium, in my opinion, is for the premium content producers, because now they have so many tools available to them in their arsenal, and the way that people are consuming.
What, for instance,
Well, for instance, you've got Hulu, you've got YouTube, you've got now services like Gravera. Has anybody heard of Gravera out there in the audience? Hands up, one person has heard of Gravera. Gravera is going to be a revolution in the media content business. They've gone out and they've kind of figured out a new way, and I have nothing to do with it, so this isn't a plug for something I'm involved with, but they've gone out and they've figured out a way to have advertisers pay for the music that people are readily stealing off the internet right now. It's a beautiful model. So the advertisers come in and kind of sponsor a playlist that they end up doing. Now they're going to HBO, and they're going to all other kinds of people now to get the video content as well, to have that be sponsorable content by the brand. So it's a very interesting model. But you're having all these kind of disruptions in the way that the content's being distributed. But when we get back to the user experience, you have to look at really what's happening in the living room with the people that are watching the content. And right now, I think it was a Mashable poll just said, kind of found that 40% of people who are watching premium television right now across all the different platforms are also concurrently doing some kind of social activity, not necessarily being on, Facebook or Twitter, but doing some kind of social activity and interacting with that content.
Do you think that's additive to the value of television or
I completely
negative?
do, because in that world, in the areas that they're interacting with, say the way that Bravo or USA is starting to interact, those are engagements, and those engagements have a media value. You know, we talk a lot about CPM up here, but on the open market, you can now readily, buy a View, you can buy a Facebook fan, you can buy just about any action that you want out there, and that's all, that's a commodity. Consumer social engagement is a commodity right now.
And I mean, sometimes commodity is a two-edged sword. I mean, sometimes commodity means prices going through the floor. Do you see advertising supporting premium content, or is premium content going to always stay in the realm of packages and pay per or whatever?
Branded
or branded
product placement or whatever. Yeah, I do see that, and I brought up Gravera because of that, because they've actually have a brand. They're marrying the content up with the brand. So when someone goes and puts that show, that Nat Geo show on their playlist inside of Gravera and shares it out socially, Gravera is paying for those, that Nat Geo would pay for those engagements that are going out, and that's when you start kind of putting that fragmented audience back together in people's social graphs, around viewers, because it's really the friends of viewers, and the Facebook folks in the room will tell you the power of friends, how much of the graph that covers. It's very powerful.
We're happy to
concept.
take questions if anybody out there. Just shoot your hand up, and for any of the panelists, you can direct it to everybody or anybody. I see one in the way back there.
Yes, this is a great discussion about broadcasting, but one of the things you keep talking about is this idea of social graphs and the narrowcasting. How are you going to give users control over that, or industry control over the narrowcasting, and how you connect the premium content to these great users?
Anybody want to take a stab? Sure.
I mean, I think what we're talking about, social media is a key way. I think the technology will exist where once shows are premiered and they're out in the cloud, people will be able to find them, and the way they'll find them is through social networks for people referring shows to friends, and we want that to happen. At the end of the day, TV is successful when you have hits. Yeah, you have hits because people have emotional connections to it. People have emotional connections because they got their friends engaged and they're talking about it and stuff. So we're for that. The model right now exists to do both a broadcast and narrowcast, and I think the evolution will be now towards the narrowcasting.
Anybody? I mean,
You
okay.
still got to pay, by the way.
Okay. I wanted to just, since we do have a couple of telco guys up here, the subject of the bandwidth crunch. Okay. In other words, it's common sense that if you have a network that already isn't ideal in a lot of situations, particularly say mobile, to bring in Ericsson, how in the world, can everybody watch YouTube mobile and not have this system just go? I mean, are you guys or are you guys investing enough in all this to make sure it's not happening? I mean, do you guys worry about it?
Just to give you some figures, just for Orange in our footprint mainly in Europe and Africa, we will invest in the next 3 years, including 2011, around 20 billion euros in network. So the issue is not how much we invest; it's about the business model itself. How we sustain such level of investment if we have no return and part of the business model.
Can all you eat survive as a bandwidth model? I mean, most people are going to be rather surprised if they start getting large bills because they watch too much television on their mobile phone. Is it going to be usage pricing at some point, or are we going to always be in paradise here?
I think all the mobile operators are looking at the way to monetize the bandwidth, especially in mobile. And we are doing something which is to manage the scarcity of the bandwidth. So we have some ideas in terms of marketing, and we have to make it simple for the customers.
Tomas, how about you guys?
I think all you can eat can survive if the level, the subscription level, is relevant enough to sustain the right return on capital employed of rolling out networks. This is not a technology discussion. This is a business model discussion.
Well, I was going to say, sometimes I have this sort of feeling that there's a fairly fixed amount of money available that can go either to the content owner, the distributor, the bandwidth owner, and that they're basically all fighting, or in some cases, the marketers come in that we're all, maybe the pie can get bigger, but otherwise, if somebody has to pay $50 a month for mobile bandwidth, they might be not so happy to pay $50 more for premium television to go on it. I mean, let's just let everyone, we got 30 seconds each to quickly, how do you see that playing out?
The content owner.
The Telecom.
Okay, one issue is how we provide some incentive to the service providers to make them, conscious of the scarcity of the bandwidth. If it's completely free and open, there is no rationale for a service provider to say, okay, I will take care of that. So we have to put incentive, and mainly by a sort of monetization of the bandwidth on the side of the service provider, not only on the side of the customer, who is not the one to implement technological capabilities to manage the bandwidth.
Mike, can the marketers help in this by underwriting, in effect, shifting some of those costs elsewhere?
Yeah, I don't know if it's on the usage side. Definitely on the content creation side.
From my point of view, it doesn't really. I don't think the consumer cares.
No.
At the end of the day, whether they're paying for bandwidth or for the content, they want to watch television.
Exactly.
And so, this goes back. My question about can better marketing tools. I mean, for instance, let me just put it this way: do you see applying the kinds of tools that we now use routinely on the internet to mass market television? Is that going to happen, and how quickly?
Well, I think it's already happening, and the tools that the basic tools that you're using kind of harken back to this. We've all heard the example of the soap operas and how content used to be sponsored in the past. That it wasn't kind of broken up into commercial spots, that it was integrated in the programming, or it was just that halo effect from being on top of it. And so I think you're going to see a lot more of that, because now as you start seeing premium content live in communities and live in portals offline that the content producers and the telcos are kind of providing, you're seeing those sponsorship opportunities start to come up again. So it's kind of that integrated package where you go, okay, what's my TV spend? What am I, it's all about targeting an audience. So it's what show does that go after? What are the other interests that they have, and how do I advertise around that? So I think it's just going to kind of broaden the sponsorship package out more than it is right now, and we're seeing that already.
Do we have any urgent questions from the audience? Because if there are no urgent ones, we might just have to call this. Do we have any urgent comments from the panelists? Anybody that's dying to say something that hasn't been said? Because all of this, I'm hoping, is basically pump priming for the next 2 days. I mean, that was one of the reasons we wanted to do this, was to throw a bunch of unanswered questions out there that people can continue for the next 2 days to talk about. Giles, go.
Yeah, I would say just on that last question that, there's sometimes a pretty big difference between marketing and reality, and this idea that everything is served from the cloud. Once you push everything into the cloud, connectivity and bandwidth does become the most important thing, because at the point of access you consume that, and that is driving the capacity of the networks. So what I think is actually going to happen is all the content that's popular will actually be cached much further out in operators' networks towards the edge to offload their networks. So what the user perceives to be a cloud in the center of the internet will actually be a box at the end of their street.
And that's what will save us from drowning in a...
Absolutely.
Okay, so we don't have to worry that we're just going to all turn into the color of an old TV screen, that gray.
We'll fix it.
You'll fix it. Thank you. Well, that's it. More Ericsson, please. I keep saying that's what it should be. All right. On that cheerful note, why don't you guys just stay here for 1 second. Whatever programs you've looked at, either printed or on the mobile apps, we decided out of mercy to everybody to open the bar at 6:30. Okay, so you don't have a half an hour. And we're going to run that till 8:30, and we'll be starting the famous nightcaps, which is amazing entertainment. We've got Stefan Shakespeare, Pablos Holman, and a special guest musical star who will be entertaining you. So some people I know are going out to dinner or whatever, but we've now got cocktails up at the Columbia terrace, which is back at the hotel. So you got to traipse back to the hotel, up to the second floor, and we'll see you all over there and continue this amazing discussion. So with that, you're all dismissed. Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you.